It was August 19th, 1997, late at night. Art Bell hosted the radio show Coast to Coast AM, and a man came on that show and told a story I have never been able to get out of my head. He said he was 17 years old when the United States Air Force gave him one of the most powerful rockets, a Titan III, to launch his own engine at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. And he said that engine hit, ready for this, Mach 37. Yeah, Mach 37. That's 28,000 miles per hour. He said they blindfolded him, put in a military aircraft, and took him to Area 51. And he said what he found underground in that Nevada desert was not something any human being had built. I remember sitting in the dark thinking, this is either the most elaborate lie I have ever heard, or this is the most important story that nobody is talking about. So I started searching. In 1997, the internet was barely a thing, but there was enough information. I'd piece together here, a little interview there, and something, an interview over here, and a document over there, and a new thing popped up. Well, at the end of April 26, 29 years after the first Art Bell broadcast, I finally heard him tell stories he had never publicly told before. And I knew it was time to put this all in one place. And this is the story of David Adair. In 1971, David was 17 years old. He was blindfolded, placed on a military aircraft, and flown to one of the most classified locations on the face of the earth. He had not even been arrested. He had done nothing wrong. He had simply built something so far beyond what anyone believed a teenager was capable of, that the United States government decided it needed to see him in person at the one place where America's most extraordinary secrets are kept. And what he encountered in that underground facility in the Nevada desert will become one of the most gripping testimonies in the history of American aerospace, and one of the most remarkable stories any human being has ever told. David Adair was already something the world had never seen before. Before Area 51, before the blindfold, before the underground hangar, he was a self-taught rocket scientist who earned the highest engineering honor the United States Air Force could give a civilian. Yep, David Adair was born in 1954. His father worked in the early world of NASCAR racing, which meant David grew up surrounded by high-performance engines from the time he could walk. And he had a photographic memory, and devoured physics books at age 7. You know, the way other kids read comic books. And in the fields and barns of rural Ohio, he started building rockets. Not model rockets, not kids you buy at Hobby Lobby. Rockets he designed from scratch. From mathematics he was absorbing faster than any classroom teacher could ever teach. At age 11, he built a cryogenic liquid rocket fuel. A what? I still don't know what that means. A cryogenic liquid fuel. At age 11, it was 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, capable of soaring 52,000 feet in the air, 1,600 miles per hour. He launched it in a cornfield, set the whole thing on fire. He kept building. By his mid-teens, he had constructed hundreds of rockets, collected regional science awards, and made the local newspapers. His mathematical work reached a young physicist just starting his career, a man named Stephen Hawking. As a matter of fact, Hawking would later tell David that Hawking's IQ was approaching 300. He said, but David, yours is pushing 150 points beyond that. I can't even fathom that. Well, David grew up 40 miles from Wapakoneta, and I don't even know if I'm saying that word right, Wapakoneta, Ohio. The hometown of, ready? First man who walked on the moon? Who is it? Quick guess? You're right, Neil Armstrong. The connection that would truly change the trajectory of his life, however, arrived through something almost laughably ordinary. His mother. She was a nurse. Evangeline Adair worked the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. at Martin Memorial Hospital in Mount Vernon, Ohio. In 1966, she became the first woman ever in charge of an ICU unit at the hospital. And by chance, one of her patients was a 93-year-old man named Irving. Irving! A difficult patient who struck one of the nurses with his cane. When the nurse came to the nurse's aid center, Vanto said, what happened? He goes, Irving hit me with his cane. Evangeline run down to the room, grabbed his cane, broke it over the headboard, stuck the sharp point in his neck, saying, "You touch one of my nurses again, it'll be all over for you. You understand that?" Well, poor little guy goes, "Okay." From then on, they became best friends. Irving's son wanted to see him one day, but he had a severe paparazzi problem. The only way he could visit was during the graveyard shift when no one was around. The son was General Curtis LeMay. Yeah, that guy, founder of the Strategic Air Command, former Air Force Chief of Staff, one of the most powerful military figures in American history. Well, over those late nights, LeMay got to know Evangeline because he had to go to the nurse's station and go see her father. And she would tell him about her son and the rockets and the awards and the mathematics. And LeMay said, "Does he walk around with a notebook?" She said, "Yeah." He said, "You think I could see that notebook sometime?" So she brought it from home and showed him. He looked at it and went, "You got a Xerox machine? I can copy some of this?" So he took about a third of David's notebook and copied a bunch of it. Then he sent it off to Pythilam Memorial. That's opposite Ohio State University, and it's one of the highest, enormous government think tanks we had in this country. And his question was, is there anything to this kid's math? Their answer, yes, he is closing in on an electromagnetic fusion containment engine. What? He's trying to build an artificial black hole. If he sustains the field within, he'll have the power of the sun at his fingertips. Oh, LeMay was not just intrigued, he was all in. Well, with LeMay's backing and funding arranged through Congressman John Ashbrook, who happened to be the chairman of the Internal Security Committee, David built his most ambitious project yet. He called it Pythilam. The name arrived in a dream, and linguists at the Cornell University would later trace the closest transliteration to a phrase meaning Apollo's arrows, the fastest things known in the universe. Now, every rocket engine in history has run on one or two principles, they say. Either it's liquid fuel or solid propellant. David built a third option, an electromagnetic fusion containment engine. Go look that up. Magnetic fields containing plasma reaction, directed as thrust. No combustion, no conventional exhaust, something the aerospace industry has never seen. Well, Air Force technicians evaluated it and they were stunned. And David Adair received the United States Air Force Award for Most Outstanding Achievement in the field of engineering sciences. And then came the Titan III. Now, Titan III, the government did not give David a hobbyist launch pad. They gave him a Titan III missile, one of the most powerful launch vehicles in the American military arsenal. And that's designed to carry heavy payloads into orbit during the Cold War. Well, they loaded Pythilam into a semi-truck painted with grocery store markings, Piggly Wiggly on the side. That's a grocery store chain back on the East Coast. And they drove her to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And at the gate, David announced who he was. The gates immediately opened, and armed soldiers with blue berets came out and put a protective circle around him as Pythilam was loaded for transport to White Sands. Now, I'll tell you what, this gets really heavy. This is New Mexico, June 1971. I was just graduating high school, and David's at White Sands Military Base, missile range, watching his rocket on the pad. Pythilam left the pad with a concussive impact that moved through the chest rather than hitting the ears. It crossed Mach 8 within seconds, then Mach 15, and it kept climbing and climbing, ultimately reaching Mach 37. That's 37 times the speed of sound. Like I said earlier, 28,000 miles an hour. Even though they had the coordinates, the tracking radar lost Pythilam entirely. The launch was a triumph beyond anything projected. And then the mood among the military personnel shifted in a direction that made the hair on David's neck stand up. Department of Defense officials approached him, not with congratulations, with instructions. Come with us. He was placed on a military aircraft, windows blacked out, and he landed in Nevada, blindfolded, driven across the desert. When the blindfolds came off, he was standing at the edge of the most classified address in America, Groom Lake, Area 51. He was taken underground, through reinforced corridors, past checkpoint after checkpoint, descending level by level through the Nevada bedrock. At the end of the long corridor, blast doors opened. His rocket, Pythium, already retrieved and transported, stood on a platform across the room. But it was not what he had been brought there to see, because next to his rocket, dwarfing it, defying everything he thought he understood about what was possible, was something else entirely. What occupied that chamber was an enormous engine, he was told. It formed a suggested figure 8, but its surface was not steel or titanium or any composite material in the aerospace catalog. It was organic, textured like a biological tissue, threaded with passages that appeared impossibly to function like veins. It did not look built. It looked grown. David moved toward it. He reached out and placed both hands on 2 pods on the surface, and the pods closed over his fingers, tightening like the Batmobile sealing its cockpit. Click, 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 click. He started to shout for help, and a voice stopped him. Not mechanical. Not an alarm. A voice. Feminine. Warm. Completely calm. David has described it as sounding like famous actress Lauren Bacall, or similar to the voice of the Kim Carnes song when she sang Betty Davis Eyes. And it said one word. His name. David. The voice said, sit still. I'm going to download into you. You might find this a little bit uncomfortable. What followed was a wave of electrical force that moved up both his arms, into his neck, around his carotid artery, and exploded into his mind, a cascade of images, thousands of worlds passing by so fast he could barely perceive them. The accumulated memories of a consciousness that had traveled the universe for hundreds of millions of years were downloaded into a 17-year-old boy's mind from Ohio. When it was over, the voice told him something that reframed everything. David, every dream, every formula that had arrived in night formally formed, every idea he thought was his own, she had sent them. All of them. Every single one. And guess what her name was? Pythilam. The name out of a ship. Same name. Pythilam was not a machine. She was a conscious being, ancient beyond comprehension, who had been stranded in that underground room for decades on that engine, refusing to cooperate with people who held her. She had searched for someone she could trust, someone with a pure heart and a mind capable of receiving what she carried. And she had found David. And she had been guiding him toward that room since before he knew she even existed. And she said, we're leaving. I'm not going to work with these black hearts. They don't care about people of the earth. You are taking me out of here in your body. Kind of sounds spooky, doesn't it? Well, David walked out of Area 51 carrying a passenger no scanner would ever detect. Up here. What remained of the engine in that underground room was, as Pythilam said, just a hole. The real life force was now inside of David. Not everyone in that faculty was interested in what David had experienced. Arthur Rudolph, a German rocket engineer brought to America after World War II under Operation Paperclip, remember Operation Paperclip, represented a faction that wanted one thing, David's engineering technology, so they could turn it into a first-strike nuclear weapon. And David refused, and General LeMay had to intervene and secure his release. Before leaving, David destroyed his rocket. He took some graphite off one of the guard's gates or something and put it on his ship. Before leaving, David destroyed his rocket, Pythilam. He rendered it permanently non-functional. They would not get the machine if they could not get the knowledge from him. In 1972, during his high school graduation ceremony, while his name was being called, 2 men in black suits appeared at the end of the gymnasium, carrying a military draft order with David's name on it. He was taken from his own graduation and transported to a CIA facility where Arthur Rudolph was waiting. Build another engine or face the consequences. Well, David refused again. Once again, LeMay intervened. They negotiated a settlement. David would serve in the United States Navy. Cambridge University scholarship, a full scholarship, by the way, that was waiting, was now gone. and David served in the Navy for more than 20 years. He designed a jet turbine rapid replacement system that set a world record for turnaround time, and that record still stands today. Well, David Adair became a naval aviator and was recruited into the Office of Naval Intelligence. And what followed across the next 2 decades included operations that David described are still classified. But he did share some glimpses in that interview. On loan from ONI to the DNA, he actually infiltrated Pablo Escobar's operation by stealing the drug lord's M51 Mustang and flew. He got it from the hangar, flew it out of the hangar, flew it around, came right back 90 miles an hour through the hangar. Well, Esco was so impressed by the sheer insanity of it that he gave him a job on the spot, calling David the crazy gringo. And David actually worked inside the Medellin cartel for 5 years. And he always wore a magnesium incendiary grenade around his neck every day to ensure his own insurance policy. And he'd report back to the DNA through a hidden radio in the cockpit. He faked his death by burning the plane to ash to exit the operation. On another occasion, inside a nuclear submarine, referred to David only as Tigerfish, all 5 nuclear reactors went wide open. They were stuck open to emergency shutdown failure, like the China syndrome. The captain came to him and said, "Look, we got 18 minutes before we have a complete meltdown." And David was wearing an experimental exoskeleton suit. He went to the reactor room that was glowing, found a broken scissor bracket on a single power rod. He fixed it with some vice grips and a tack welder, and he restored all 5 reactors with only 3.5 minutes to spare before complete meltdown. Well, the entire event was immediately classified. His reward: because David didn't drink, he could go to any bar, though, around the world, mention he was on that submarine, and he always got free iced tea for 28 years. He also worked on one of the most classified aircraft programs in American history. Alongside engineers from Lockheed Skunk Works, he contributed to the Aurora, a scramjet aircraft so secret to this day that the government not officially confirmed it exists. But when Skunk Works engineers celebrated breaking Mach 10, David quietly told them that, well, Pythilam had done that Mach 37 in 1971. On April 9th, 1997, months before the first Art Bell interview, David even was sworn in by members of the United States Congress to speak on extraterrestrial intelligence, recovered alien hardware, on the congressional record, but under oath. And a few weeks later, on August 19th, 1997, he sat down with Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM, the most listened to overnight radio program in America, and told his full story for the first time. And the interview, you can go see it on YouTube, is 3 hours long. And Art Bell brought him back for a second interview on November 17th. Rebroadcast the original one and the second one. 4 airings in 1 year, driven entirely by overwhelming listener demand. We want to hear more David! Then in May 2001, Dr. Stephen Greer organized the Disclosure Project at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., the most significant formal disclosure event in history. More than 20 credentialed military and intelligence witnesses testified under penalty of perjury. David was among them. Dr. Greer said David's testimony was among the most technically detailed and credible he had ever collected. And for anyone who wants the paper trail on David's life, David said, go get it. I'm in the John M. Ashbrook Center at Ashland University in Ohio, holds all the congressional papers of Congressman John Ashbrook, the man who founded David's work, because people say he's full of caca. The archive is not classified. It's not hidden. It's an academic library open to anyone who walks in through the door. There's proof who he is and what he's done. In a recent interview that I caught on April 2026, conversation with Sue Greenwald on American Stories, David has gone further than ever before. He said Pythilam, he says, is not simply a presence inside of him. And she is excited. She's actually restless. Why? Her family, her civilization is coming to rescue her. Her family? What? Rescue? Civilization? What's been 44 years to us, she told him, is 44 seconds to them. They're on their way. Together? Whoa. And David also shared that he has died twice, clinically on the operating table. Both times he returned, NDE, near-death experience. During his most recent near-death experience, a nurse noted something strange about his heartbeat. She said it sounded like there was an echo, 2 heartbeats, overlapping. Pythilam, David says, was keeping him alive from the inside. Well, what he experienced during the dying, he now described openly. He said he saw the light and he ran toward the light, more curious than afraid. And as he was running, he saw Jesus standing right by him. He runs right past him. And Jesus called out, "Where are you going?" He goes, "I want to see what's on the other side so I can tell everybody." But he was told, "You got to go back. Heaven wasn't finished with you." He said, "I don't want to go back. They're all crazy back there." The reply, "Oh, that's beside the point," Jesus said. "You're going to have to help him, David." Oh. And David's reply was kind of interesting. He said, "I know it's God's show. It's been his show ever since, and always will be. He's already won Armageddon, and heaven is just going through the motions for the sake of the rest of us." Jesus nodded, "Yep, I already won." David came back, and he says, "Don't be afraid of death." Well, now he is 72 years old, and he's still talking. He's still building. And by his account, he's just getting started. David Adair, rocket prodigy, award-winning engineer, Navy veteran, NASA consultant, congressional witness, and a man who has been saying for nearly 30 years, with documentation, with sworn testimony, and with the kind of consistency that is very hard to fake, that the universe is far larger and far more populated than the official story is admitted. What do you think? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe if you want to go deeper on stories like this, and share this with someone who's ready to have their understanding of the world quietly rearranged.